see the presentation?
Ooh.
Yes.
The meeting is being
And
recorded.
everybody is on Zoom.
Yes,
So,
and
so in that case, we can get started.
Livia, and I suggest that you tell everybody to mute themselves.
Right, and Livia, Adam is gonna introduce you right now, so hold on a minute.
This is Stacy. I'm setting Zoom up for my mom. She's not ready yet.
Okay, let me know when you're ready. And
Okay,
Hi,
thank
everybody.
you.
Are we waiting for somebody?
My mom, Cheryl.
let me know when everyone's ready and we could start. I'll introduce Livia.
Who's not ready? I'm ready.
We all ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
She'll be right down. I can hear her. She's coming down. I'm so sorry for the delay.
Oh, no problem.
Just let us know and we could start.
Oh my goodness, finally.
Are we ready?
Why can't, isn't there other people on here?
Grace, you have to mute yourself. We can hear you.
Okay, this
I have
is
to
Stacy
unmute
again,
myself?
speaking
No,
for
you
my
have to
mom.
mute
Can
yourself.
everybody please mute yourselves, okay?
You can
Thank
start
you.
now.
Livia, how do you do that, Livia?
What?
All the
How
way in
do
the
you do
left-hand
that?
corner on the
Sheila.
bottom, it'll say mute,
I don't see anything. That's why I'm asking.
like a microphone.
I don't know. I don't see it. That's why I was
Now,
asking.
how do
The
I,
host can do
Eva,
it.
or anybody, how do I put on the sound? Because I have sound with some of the slides.
Dean?
You were going to have to, there was a way to, when you share it, you had to say yes for sound. I don't think you did that. When you
What's
shared it.
that?
When you shared your screen, you had to share it with sound. I'm not sure if you did that.
Do
or
I
not.
have to click on share sound?
You could try that. But when to share sound, usually you have to say share the screen with sound. I'm not sure if you did that.
Well, I don't know because I'm supposed to have sound with some of the slides. But if I can't, then I'll do it without the sound.
Olivia, why don't you test that one?
What?
Why don't you test it quickly before you start, if there is a sound or not?
I tested it. There's no sound.
Okay.
I don't
Then-
see the sound.
Then follow, I guess, what Jason told you that.
I don't really, I
Yeah.
did try that, but it didn't work.
Okay, then I don't know how to help. Sorry.
So we can start without the sound.
Okay, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the ICCJ Education Department, and we are honored to have Livia Rothman. The Rothmans have been longtime members of ICCJ, and Livia is an accomplished author, and she's going to be telling us about her book, The World is Upside Down, about her experiences growing up in Hungary in the Holocaust, and how she made it through and eventually made it her way to America. Please, everyone, mute yourselves as Livia will talk about her book. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Adam, for the kind introduction. Yes, I am a child of 2 Holocaust survivors from Hungary, born only 3 short years after World War II. When I retired in 2010, I started volunteering in Holocaust museums, first at the Queensboro Kupferberg Center, then at the Jewish Heritage Museum in Manhattan, and finally at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in Glen Cove. In 2013, I became a speaker at the Holocaust Memorial Center. With the help of the staff and volunteers, I created a PowerPoint presentation that basically tells the story of my two Holocaust survivor parents and what life was like with them after the war. I wrote my memoir in 2020 during the COVID lockdown, but I told my story many times before that and since then. The title of my memoir is "The World is Upside Down," and it indeed is upside down. Just about everything that's on my PowerPoint is in the book, but the book contains many details about my family and about myself that I couldn't include in the PowerPoint. So now I would like to show you my PowerPoint, and I encourage you to read the book for even more details if you're interested. Most of all, I also want you to take home what you learned today and tell your children, your grandchildren, and your friends all about the atrocities of the Holocaust. Tell them that we must never forget, and we must fight hate wherever and wherever it rears its ugly head to make sure there will be no more genocides against any groups of people. The paperback edition of my book is available in the synagogue library. It is also available for purchase at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The ebook is available at Kobo Books, kobo.com. I wanted to have you listen to some music, but I don't know if I can share the sound. Oh, no, I don't think I know how to share the sound at the moment. So what I usually do is I play the Blue Danube by Johann Strauss, because the Blue Danube was written about the river Danube, and that goes straight through Hungary, divides Hungary in half, basically divides Budapest, the capital of Hungary also. And it is a beautiful melody, one of my favorites. And also it was played many, many places in concert halls, at parties, but sadly, it was also played in concentration camps where the inmates were marching to the gas chambers. And also, Johann Strauss's great-grandfather was a Hungarian Jew, which is one of the reasons too why I like to play this music for people as they come into the room or as they start the Zoom presentation. Now, you can see the picture in the middle. Obviously, that's me in the middle and my parents in Putnok, Hungary, in small town in Hungary. This is a map of part of Europe, and Hungary is on the right side.
No,
Why not?
because I want to listen to it also.
Can you please mute yourselves?
We can put it over here.
No, I
Please,
can't. Right back.
is everybody muted? Okay,
David freaking
Hungary
has to
is,
move yourself.
what?
David freaking has to mute. Thank you.
Okay, please mute, thank you. Okay, he did. Hungary is located in the eastern portion of Central Europe. Okay, that's map of Hungary. Budapest is the capital of Hungary, and it's in the center. The blue line is the river Danube. And on the northern end of the map is Putnok, Hungary, which is where I was born. It's a small town very close to the border of Slovakia. My mother was born on the other side of the border in József. At the time of the Holocaust, that was also part of Hungary. However, now it is part of Slovakia. So I was born in Putnok, my father also, and my mother was born in József on the other side of the border, and Budapest, the capital, is in the center. Here you see my father on the left and me. I was a baby once. And a postcard from Putnok, Hungary, a picture postcard in 1948, but that's where I was born in that's when I was born. I was born in 1948. This is a picture of the Orthodox synagogue. And the reason I picked that is because my father and his family worshiped there before the war. My father and my mother had very different experiences during the Holocaust. My father was in forced labor with the Hungarian army. In Hungarian, they called it Munka Szolgálat. He was there from 1941 to 1944. In 1944, he escaped and hid until he was liberated by the Soviet army. And then he came home to Putnok and found that much of his family was murdered in Auschwitz. His father, his sister, and two of his brothers. My mother's experience was really different from my father. She was living in Joshua, which became part of Greater Hungary during the Holocaust. She was living with her parents and with two sisters-in-law and 5 nieces and nephews. And her entire family unit was sent to Auschwitz in 1944. She became a slave laborer in a bomb factory, but the rest of her family, my family, was sent to the gas chambers. Why am I talking to you? And why did I write my book? And why do I speak to so many people about my experiences? I do because I am honoring my family and the other Holocaust victims and survivors. I'm also doing it to teach people about the dangers of intolerance, which include stereotyping, prejudice, bullying, physical and emotional bullying, which then leads to a genocide. And I will show you how all of this happened to my family in Europe and to all the Jews of Europe, and how it turned into a genocide. I also do it to inspire people to protest current genocides, which we still have, and there are people who do. Now, on the left side, you see my father in the center wearing a tie with his friends in Putnok, Hungary. And on the right side, my mother and her sister Margot on the other side wearing the same dress, and their friend in the middle. This was taken in Joshua in Hungary, which is now Slovakia. And this was taken before 1938, because before 1938, Jews had a very good life in Hungary. They basically had a quiet life. And these people look like they're smiling. And the reason why I mentioned 1938 is because that's when the anti-Jewish laws came into effect in Hungary. In Germany, that happened in 1933. In Hungary in 1938, children could not go to school together. Jewish children could not go to school with children who were not Jewish. They could not go to university. Jewish people could not vote. They could not work in any government jobs, and they could not work in many, many professions. So life after 1938 became increasingly difficult. Before 1938, Hungarian towns had a sizable Jewish population, large loving families, and a rich culture. This is a picture of a Hungarian town with Jewish population, not my family. Nevertheless, my mother had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. My father had 4 brothers and a sister. My mother knew how to play the piano. She spoke Slovak and German. My father went to yeshiva. He spoke Hungarian. My mother also spoke Hungarian. My father spoke Hungarian, German, and Yiddish. And both families owned shops. My father's family owned the shoe store, and my mother's family owned the fabric shop. My mother knew also how to play the piano and how to play the accordion. This is also a picture of a successful Hungarian family with business, not my family. My family owned, like I said, a fabric shop and a shoe store. And that is Hungarian food, chicken paprikás and nokeli, which is a Hungarian pasta. So my mother was a very good cook. And so was her mother and all of my aunts. And my cousin Eva, who's in the audience here, is an excellent cook. But that, I don't know, I did not inherit that trait. They were also excellent bakers. Nobody in my family now inherited that trait, but they were outstanding cooks and bakers. This is a picture of the Kazinci Street Synagogue in Budapest. I picked this picture because my father worked here as a rabbi's assistant from 1957 to 1963. And also when we went to Budapest in 2006, we visited this synagogue and it was beautifully renovated. We were one of the first people to see it. I told the people who worked there that my father was here between 1957 and 1963, and he opened the door and let me in, and let me and Joel and Steve into the synagogue to see it, and it is gorgeous. So that is a picture of Greater Hungary, and on the right side you see Horthy and Hitler. Horthy was the admiral of Hungary, and the two of them look very happy together. Hungary was a collaborator, and well, Horthy was a collaborator of Hitler, and Hitler gifted him land. Hungary lost all this land after World War I. Why? Because Hungary and Germany lost World War I. They eventually lost World War II. But after World War I, all of these areas, the purple, the yellow, the red, were taken away from Hungary. And Hitler was so grateful to Horthy that he gave the land back. So my mother lived in the purple section. That was from Slovakia. This here, the yellow section is from Romania. And I know I have cousins here whose father came from that section. And this down, the red section is from Croatia and Serbia. So we now have Greater Hungary, and my mother now is part of Hungary also. Again, here's a picture of Hitler and Horthy shaking hands and smiling at each other. And my mother was interviewed by the Cleveland Plain Dealer. This is the interview. She told them her story, but at the end of the article, she said, "They murdered my heart." The Nazis murdered her heart, but they didn't murder all of her heart because my mother was a very loving person. She had plenty of heart left to love me and my father and Joel and my children, Erica and Steve. And I am sure from up above, she loves my grandchildren. And Jason, who's my other bonus son. So as I said before, my father and my mother had very, very different experiences. My father was in forced labor from 1941 to 1944, did very dangerous work, was involved in doing digging, shooting trenches, repairing bridges and roads, and went ahead of the German and Hungarian armies. They had no weapons, no protection, no kind of protection, not even clothing that would protect them from any harm. They hardly got any food or water, and they were treated with extreme cruelty. Many people died in forced labor. This is my uncle, my mother's youngest brother, who was murdered while in forced labor at the Russian front. He was only 22 years old. He was my mother's youngest sibling. Now I want to talk to you about resistance. There are many forms of resistance. I told you that they didn't have guns. They didn't have any way to protect themselves. They didn't know how to protect themselves, so they found different ways of resisting. And my father, who is a very religious man who went to yeshiva, took his tefillin with him to forced labor, which was against the law and against the rules. And if they would have found it on him, they would have killed him. I don't have to tell you what it is because you all know, but usually when I talk to students, I have to describe it. So my father took his tefillin with him, and every morning he went to the outhouse and put it on and he prayed. One morning, he heard some noises and he got scared because he was sure that he's going to be discovered. He had to throw away the tefillin. But that was resistance through religion. And I'll talk to you more about resistance as we go on. As I said before, my mother had very different experiences. And when my son, Steve, was in middle school, he wanted to tell my mother's story. And he asked my mother to tell him what she experienced. My mother lived in Ohio and my family lived in New York. So my mother wrote a letter in Hungarian and I translated it into English. And my son read this to the class. And in that letter, my mother said, up until the last minute, everyone hoped and foolishly believed that the Hungarian Jews would not be touched. And indeed, the Hungarians were last to go because they were basically safe until 1944. But what happened was that Horthy started seeing signs that Germany and Hungary were losing the war. Plus, all of the other countries were already basically what they say, Juden-free, free of Jews. And now Germany wanted to deport the Hungarian Jews. Horthy did not feel comfortable at this point to do that because he felt like he was losing the war and that this could really create more problems for him. So he started having some second thoughts and possibly talk to the Allies. Hitler found out, of course, and as soon as he found out, he ordered that the Nazi Germans should occupy Hungary. On March 19th, 1944, the German Nazis marched into Hungary, Greater Hungary. Horthy was removed and another man was replacing him. His name was Szálasi. He was a member of the Arrow Cross. In Hungarian, we called Nyilas party. And he was very anti-Semitic. As soon as he got his position as the head of Hungary, he signed an order to deport 500,000 Hungarian Jews, most of whom were sent to Auschwitz. Few days after he came into power, my mother, with her parents, her two sisters-in-law, and 5 nieces and nephews, was transported to a ghetto. Ghettos were set up in the center of towns, and they were very crowded, unsanitary. There was hunger and disease, physical and mental abuse, and fear of execution. That picture that you see is a picture of a Hungarian man in Budapest. This is the Budapest ghetto, a broken bed on top of ice and snow, and he's freezing. My mother and her family were in the ghetto for about 6 weeks. At the end of that time, they were taken to the train stations, and they were pushed into cattle cars. More than 80 people per car. There was no room to sit down, no food, no water, and they had a 3-day journey. Of course, during this time, many people died. And this is a picture of Hungarian women and children arriving in Auschwitz. When they arrived, they saw a sign that said Arbeit macht frei. What does that mean? It means work makes you free. But this was not a work camp. This was a death camp. They didn't go there to work. So my mother, her parents, 2 sisters-in-law, and 5 nieces and nephews had to undergo selection with Dr. Mengele. And my mother was carrying a child, a little girl whose name was Marika. Marika was my Uncle Erno's daughter with his first wife. My Uncle Erno was my cousin Eva's father. And Mengele, for some reason, turned to my mother and said, "Is this your child?" And she said no, but she didn't know why he asked. She didn't know what the consequences of her answer would be. She didn't know what was going on. So she gave Marika back to her mother, and she was told to go to one side, and the rest of her family unit was told to go to the other side. So she was with these women selected for slavery, and they were with these children and older people and the parents of the children going to the gas chambers. She was the only survivor from that family unit. And now I'm going to show you pictures of the family that died, that were murdered in Auschwitz. This is my maternal grandparents, Ethel and Janu Kaufman.
Yeah.
My aunt Elsa and Uncle Alex Shani, and their 2 children, Robbie and Tommy. Shani was in forced labor and he survived, but his wife and 2 children were sent to the gas chambers and were murdered there.
Oh.
These 2 beautiful children were children of my Aunt Clara, Adi and Vera. Clara and her husband lived in Slovakia. Slovakia was occupied by the Germans in 1942. At that point, they decided to, please mute yourself.
Interesting lecture.
Please mute yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. These children and my Aunt Clara, okay, they lived in Slovakia, and my Aunt Clara and her husband decided to hide in the mountains and the forests. And they felt that the children would not be able to handle those circumstances. So they sent those children across the border to my grandparents and to my mother in Hungary. And they were safe there until 1944. But after March 19, 1944, they went to Auschwitz with my mother, and they were sent to the gas chambers. This is Marika, the little girl that my mother was carrying and holding in her arms when Mengele was doing the selection. This was my Uncle Erno's child with his first wife. This would have been Eva's half-sister. Also murdered at Auschwitz were Eileen Kaufman, my Aunt Marika's mother, Henrik Birnbaum, my paternal grandfather, my father's sister Elsa and her family, and also Shlomo and Yaakov Birnbaum, 2 brothers that my father never spoke about. And I didn't know about these 2 people until a few months ago, because the Jewish cemetery in Putnok was renovated, and we all had access to all the memorial stones and all the stones in the cemetery. And I got this memorial stone with the name of my paternal grandfather, Chaim Birnbaum, Shlomo Birnbaum, Yaakov Birnbaum, and Scheindl Birnbaum, who is Elsa. And it said that they were murdered in 1944 during the Holocaust. This is how I found out. And then I double-checked and found out for sure that my father had 2 brothers that he never talked about. My father was quiet and he didn't like to talk about what happened to his family. Can you imagine that all of his life, all of the time I spent with him, he never told me about 2 brothers who were killed in the Holocaust, but that's what happened. So my mother wrote in her letter to my son, I was starved and life was a torture. This was in Auschwitz. This is a picture of the women's barracks but my mother is not in the picture. You can see that they're cold and it is very crowded. Life in Auschwitz. Life in Auschwitz was such that my mother had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and had to go to roll call from 3 in the morning until 9 at night. And they had to stand there or sit there without moving. And they couldn't talk, they couldn't move. And it didn't matter whether it was raining or snowing, or if it was freezing cold or very hot, or the sun was shining on them. They had no protection and they couldn't move. There were frequent selections because they wanted to see if anyone looked sick or weak, and they sent them to the gas chambers. So they never knew when someone's going to come to do a selection and send more people to the gas chambers. What happened one day, my mother was in her barracks and her friend gave her a bowl of soup through an opening in the barracks wall. My mother was so hungry, she took the bowl of soup, and just that moment, the whistle blew for roll call. She was so hungry, she drank it down very, very fast. And the next morning, her lips and her mouth were full of blisters and they were burned. So her friend who gave her the soup said to her, "You can't go to roll call because they're going to send you to gas chambers. I want you to hide." My mother hid for 3 days among dead bodies until she looked better. In the meantime, her friend who gave her the soup and arranged for her to hide also found another woman
Thanks for your
to
help.
stand in for her
Oh, I
during roll
just said
call.
thanks for your help in there.
Because
That's
if
all.
they would have found out
do it
that
every
somebody's
Sunday.
missing,
I
they
have a
would have
feeling
killed
you
the
did.
entire
All the
group.
people who volunteer and want to make
Could
this
you
a
please
success.
could you mute, please?
Pretty friendly.
Please,
Oh yeah, very
Mute?
lovely.
Yeah.
You got a lot of help.
Yeah,
somebody please mute.
kind of help each other.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Whoever's
I'm visiting my
outside,
daughter.
somebody's
downstairs.
outside.
yourself.
So long.
Adams, Adam,
Outside is the
mute.
newer
Mute.
people that come in.
Thank you.
I know
So
everybody.
Oh, I'm
what
sure.
happened was her friend found a woman
I'm
from
sure.
another group to come over and stand in for her during
And then,
roll
oh,
call.
thank you. You
Yeah.
have a lovely Thanksgiving too.
Please mute. It's very hard to talk, if there's so much noise. Thank you. So anyway, now we're talking about resistance through friendship. A woman from another group walked over and stood in for my mother during roll call. She risked her life. My mother's group risked all of their lives. The other group risked their lives to help my mother. My mother wrote in her letter, "It was a miracle that none of us were caught and killed." And this is resistance through friendship. And let me tell you, in Auschwitz, they helped each other. They took a lot of risks to help each other, and that is why they survived. That is how they survived. It was amazing what my mother said, how they helped each other, how they risked their lives to help other people. So now, at the end of her stay in Auschwitz, they came to do a selection, and they sent 1,000 women, including my mother, to Buchenwald to work in a bomb factory. This is the list of 1,000 women. I have the entire list, and I highlighted my mother's name, Valeria Kaufmann from Joshua. So she, with 1,000 women, went to Buchenwald and worked in a bomb factory in Allendorf. Her job was to climb on the third bomb and attach it to a transportation vehicle. She was given wooden shoes. She had no sneakers, no socks, no stockings, and she couldn't climb with the wooden shoes, so she had to take them off, and she was bare feet all winter long. And that's how she climbed on the bombs. She was also exposed to poison, including everybody else there, and she became weak and ill. she was so sick that she couldn't go to work for about 3 weeks. And somehow she got lucky because they didn't send her back to Auschwitz to go to the gas chambers. They let her stay in her barracks and get better on her own because there was no doctor, no medicine. After 3 weeks, she was able to go back to work, but she was still weak. So at the end of the stay here, this was toward the end of the war, and the Germans decided to take them on a death march because the Germans wanted to get away from the Allies who were approaching, and they didn't want them to find the Jews either. So my mother went on a death march, but she was so weak that she told her friend, the same friend who gave her the soup, that she can't walk anymore and she's going to drop out. And her friend said to her, please don't drop out because they're going to shoot you. And my mother said, I don't care because I can't walk anymore. So she, with 7 other women, jumped into a body of water and they waited to be shot. But nobody turned around because they were in such a rush to get away from the Allies that they just left. So when they left, the women came out of the water and they lay down on the grass. And all of a sudden they saw a white flag in the distance. One of the women was able to get up and walked in the direction of the white flag, found a jeep with American soldiers and told them to go and pick up the other women. So they came, they picked up the women, took them into a German village, put them into German houses, and ordered the German families to take care of them and nurse them back to health. My mother was there for a couple of months. While she was there, an American soldier had an accordion, and my mother knew how to play the accordion. So the soldier was so impressed that he gave this accordion to my mother as a gift. And when she was feeling better and she was ready to go back to Slovakia to look for her sisters, she left this German village with 2 things, her accordion and a repatriation document. The repatriation document has her name. It shows where she came from and where she was born. It shows that she was in Auschwitz. So she then went back to Joshua to look for her sisters. She found her 2 sisters. She found 2 brothers who survived forced labor. She had to tell her brothers that their wives and children were murdered, and she had to tell her sister Clara that her 2 children were also murdered in the gas chambers. And my mother lived with survivor's guilt for the rest of her life. And at the end of the letter to my son, she said, I learned to live with the memory of these horrors, but I could never forget, nor could I ever get over what they had done to me, to my family, to my friends, and to all the Jews of Europe. So in 1947, my mother and my father were married. I was born in 1948, and we were living in Putnok. And here on the left side, I am sitting at the left end of the table. These are all my friends. My mother is on the right. My father, unfortunately, could not be there because he was sick. And this is an accordion, but it's not the accordion because that accordion was confiscated from us at the border of Austria and Hungary, unfortunately. But we had that accordion for a long time, and she played it for us and for her friends too. So these people in this picture were all survivors. None of those children had grandparents, and all those parents had no parents and lost many other family members, but we became family to each other, and we were a survivor family in Putnok. You know, this is the picture of my mother and my father that I chose to put on the front of my book. My father was basically serious. My mother was very emotional. She often cried and she always talked and showed me pictures. My father didn't talk much at all about his experiences, and I never asked. but we had happy times in our family. My mother played the accordion. She also played the grand piano for us and for our friends. She sang. My father liked to play practical jokes, and we played 14-card rummy as a family. So you think that after all this trouble, we would be left alone and live in peace in Putnok, which was a quiet town, but that didn't happen because Hungary was occupied by Soviet Russia, and it was a communist country, which meant that we didn't have any private property, there was no private business, and there was no free speech, and the Hungarians didn't like that. So in October of 1956, there was a counter-revolution, the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. And unfortunately, this revolution was quickly hijacked by the Arrow Cross and turned against the Jews. And there were many pogroms. One day, my father came home with a flyer in his hand that he showed to us, and I was 8 years old. I looked at his face, and there was fear in his face. And he said, look at this. And it said, we are coming after the communists, and next we are coming after the Jews. So my father said, we have to leave. They know where we live, and we must leave immediately. And at that point, his brother left Budapest, walked across the border to Austria and headed to Israel. So we packed a suitcase with our clothing and our pictures and the accordion and moved to Budapest to my uncle's apartment. In the apartment was a one-bedroom apartment. There was a bedroom with a big bed and a crib, and a living room with a small bed. I slept in the small bed in the living room. My mother put the pictures of all the family members who were murdered in Auschwitz on that wall unit. And I was 8 years old, turning 9, and I was afraid of the pictures. These pictures got bigger and bigger and bigger every night. They were like ghosts, and I couldn't sleep. But I couldn't tell my mother, because even at that age, I knew that she lost these people. I knew how she lost them. And I knew that if I told her that this was bothering me, I would hurt her. So I never said anything. And I just got used to having the pictures there. And now I am showing pictures to the whole world. I am proud of these people. I want the whole world to know that they lived, they existed, and that they were
When it
murdered
came on, I didn't
because
know
they
my
were
mic
Jews,
was
and only
open,
because they were
and
Jews.
3 people told me to
So
mute.
in 1963,
To mute
please
myself.
mute,
Like a maroonish.
mute,
Yeah, maroon it
Cynthia.
was.
Cynthia,
Mute, please.
mute.
Can you please mute?
Cynthia Bagel, please mute your phone. Please.
Thank you.
mute your
So
computer.
now in 1963, we left Hungary legally. We got a passport and a visa. And we left at that point by train to Trieste, from Trieste to New York by ship. And my book has a detailed description of my travel on the MS Vulcania for 17 days. It was challenging because we had a hurricane. Anyway, it's in the book. So anyway, we arrived in New York Harbor on November 22nd of 1963. November 22nd, in 3 days, it's going to be the 60th anniversary of the death of President John F. Kennedy and my arrival in the United States. I arrived on the day Kennedy was shot. So from the New York Harbor, where we got off the ship, they took us to Idlewild Airport, which is now Kennedy Airport, and we took a plane to Cleveland, Ohio. In Cleveland, we got on a bus with my mother's 2 sisters to go to Cleveland Heights. we were very animated on the bus. My mother hadn't seen her sister since about 1948. And all of a sudden, somebody said to them, "Why are you so happy? Didn't you hear that Kennedy just was shot and died?" Well, we were shocked. And I was sitting there thinking, what's going on in this country? Wow. But anyway, we arrived in my Aunt Margot's house, and the entire extended family was waiting for us. All my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my mother's two sisters and their families, and my older cousin was married and had children also. And it was amazing because in Budapest, in Hungary, basically I had no family. All of a sudden, I have aunts and uncles and cousins. I spent approximately 7 years in Cleveland until I went to college in New York. And those 7 years with the family were so special. We got together every Saturday and every Sunday. And my mother spoke to her sisters every day, sometimes more than once, in fact, usually more than once. So we lived, I met Joel, of course, at NYU. So in case you didn't know, that's where we met. And we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. So these are important days for us. So my parents worked hard. They tried to adjust. I went to school. I came to NYU. I met Joel. We got married and we had children. These children are very young right now. And these children are in the audience, or at least one of them is, and they're much older now. And I have grandchildren, but they spent a lot of time with my mother and my father. We went to Cleveland. We spent a lot of time there. And they came to New York sometimes. So the legacy continues. And this is my family. Of course, on the left, my parents and I, and Joel, my son Steve, my son-in-law Jason, who is my bonus son, with Ryan and Leila, who are now 9 and 5, my daughter Erica, who I know is in the audience, and me. And we stayed close to my parents while they were alive, and now we are a very close family. So I wish I could say that anti-Semitism didn't exist, but of course it did, and it does. And I want to tell you that there was in 2012, there was a soccer game in Hungary, in Budapest, where the Israeli team played a Hungarian team. And when the Israeli national anthem was played, the Hungarians stood with their backs and yelled, "Dirty, filthy Jews, go back to Buchenwald." Well, at least they had consequences, because they were fined by the European League $43,000. And they were told they can't play to fans for a couple of games. And if it ever happens again, they will be thrown out of the league. But I have to tell you a very positive story now. Hungary opened its doors to Israeli citizens who were displaced on October 7th during the massacre. And there is a large number of large number of Israeli citizens now staying in Hungary near Lake Balaton at a campsite. And they will be living there until they can go back to their homes in Israel. And Hungarian Jews are keeping them company, making them feel more comfortable and helping them adjust. In addition to that, the Israeli soccer team was supposed to play right now with teams from the European League in Israel, but because of the war, they couldn't. So Hungary offered that they can play their games in Hungary. And believe it or not, they have been playing in Hungary with the Hungarian Jews going to the games with Israeli flags to make them feel more comfortable. I have to say that this is a miracle. Never in my life would I have thought that I would say that this happened in Hungary, but it did. And you have to take help from wherever you can get it. So yes, there are upstanders in Hungary. This is a demonstration also against prejudice. That's the Hungarian flag, red, white, and green. NEM means no. Papa is the name of the town. These people came to Budapest to demonstrate against prejudice because the Hungarian parliament wanted to make a list of Jewish members because they said that they had dual loyalties. Well, it didn't happen. So after my mother died, I went through all her belongings and I found a notebook which had a lot of things that she copied, poems and recipes. My mother loved to cook and bake, and she apparently also liked to read poems. And what I found that she copied in its entirety, this poem, Hope for the Future, excerpt, this is from the poem Children Learn What They Live by Dorothy Nolte. She copied the entire poem, which is long, but the end of it is, if children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with acceptance, they learn to love. And that's what her hope is for the future, and that is my hope. So the legacy continues, and again, this is the family today, but a few years older, not too much. So I'm here, and I'm only one, but I am one. And I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I can do what I'm doing here. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. I want to leave you with this message. Since the atrocities of October 7th, my friends, who are children of Holocaust survivors, keep saying, I'm so glad my parents are not alive to see what's going on today in Israel and what's happening with the level of anti-Semitism. So I want to leave you with a message from Holocaust survivors. This is an open letter on the Hamas attacks from a community of Holocaust survivors. We are Holocaust survivors who volunteer at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, sharing our experiences with the public. We are always gratified to see how much interest there is from young people from every part of the world. To hear their comments and questions gives us hope for the future. Today, as we see the murderous destruction in Israel, that hope is dimmed. All our lives we mourned for our loved ones lost to the genocidal actions of the Nazis and their collaborators, but we hoped the lessons of the past could shape a different future. Today we mourn for Israel that holds such a special place and special meaning for us. In our youth, we were proud Jews in our communities throughout Europe. Eventually, that meant escape or certain death. We wanted to flee, but no one would take us. We longed for freedom and security, but there was no Jewish state. Today, the state of Israel is the guarantor of a Jewish future, but it is under horrific assault by Hamas terrorists. Today, men, women, and children are again targeted as Jews. Today, we witness the worst killing of Jews since the Holocaust. This is not what we expected in this final chapter of our lives as we contemplate our legacy, the future of Holocaust memory and education, and the future of our people. We write this letter to humanity in sorrow, but also in hope. We know pain few can comprehend. Having seen our families and communities obliterated, we are living proof that the unthinkable is always possible. We are also living proof of resilience, that we can rebuild as our fierce determination demonstrates. We must be realistic about the dangers, but we must never despair. That would be a victory for those seeking to destroy us. That is why memory and education become more important with each passing year, and why we are proud of our contributions to fortify new generations to face the challenges that lie ahead. We promised our loved ones we would never forget and never give up. especially at this darkest of moments. That remains our promise and our challenge to humanity. Thank you. Thank you.
Livy, thank you. You did fantastic. Would you like to do a Q&A if someone has some questions?
Absolutely.
If anybody has some questions, just raise your hands and Livy will acknowledge you. But just make sure, please, everybody is muted but the person asking the question. Thank you.
I just want to add that there are obviously a lot more details in my book about my life in Putnok, in Budapest, about the trip on the ship, and about the 1956 revolution, about the family in Cleveland, and so on. There are a lot of details.
Livy, there's a Linda, not Cora Bonellic, but the other Linda is raising her hand.
Okay.
Linda Fingerman. Livia, I missed some of the beginning, so I apologize for coming on late, but I just want, as another second generation survivor of Hungarian parents, I just want to say how touching your presentation was, and of course, very sad. And my parents also did not talk about what happened until much later in life. My mother spoke a little bit through a speakers bureau, but to my sister and I would not talk about these things. So
thank you.
I just want to thank you for your courage and bravery in coming out and writing your book, as well as speaking this way today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It isn't easy because it's very emotional right now because of what's going on with anti-Semitism and in Israel. It isn't easy to talk about it. It's never easy to talk about it, but it's even more difficult now.
David's iPad. Unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm a good friend of Livia's. We sat and talked very rarely about her adventure coming to this country. And I just want to know, you and I are very close, and I just want to know, how did you get to work for disability?
I'm
me?
sorry, Sheila, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry, sweetheart.
I just want to know, how did you get to work for the government technically? How did that occur? And how you and I became friends, and how you talked about how you came on the day that JFK was assassinated. And I just, to this day, listening to this whole presentation, I got so emotional. I'm so glad we're friends.
I love you too.
I am. But I never asked you, how did you start working for the state of New York? Just out of curiosity.
Okay. Well, I came to New York. I went to NYU and I met Joel there. I was studying counseling and guidance. What happened was I was in a 45 credit program. At the end, New York State decided that now you need 60 credits to become a guidance counselor. And I frankly was burned out from going to school, and I decided I didn't want to go for the 60 credit program. So then I took all types of tests, government tests. I took New York State. I actually was offered jobs teaching in New York City. I took federal tests, and I was called for the disability analyst position. And I took it because I also decided I didn't want to be a teacher at that point, and I couldn't be a guidance counselor. So I took the job with New York State Disability, and I met you.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm just.
But
the
I
whole
don't
story.
regret. I don't regret taking that job. I thought it was a very good job for me, and because of that, you know, I was able to do a lot of things, raise a family. I have benefits, you know,
I
and
know.
so and I'm
Yeah.
certainly and I met so many wonderful people,
I know.
and obviously you were one of them. And I have friends that I met in that office that I still am friendly with.
Yeah. Well,
Like you.
the story was unbelievable. Thank you for sharing it. That's all I have to say. I
You're
love you
welcome.
and Joel and the kids, and I just love you guys. I'm so glad I sat on this, listening to you. Okay. Love you, Livia.
Yeah.
Livia, you get to choose between Michelle and Saul. They both had their hands raised.
But I don't know. I'll answer both.
Okay, Michelle, you want to go first? Saul, do you mind ladies first?
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Saul. So I've been thinking about it a lot. My parents were not survivors, but I grew up in a very religious community with a lot of survivors. And my brother and I would always talk and we'd say, I don't understand it. Didn't they see the writing on the wall? Why didn't they get up and leave? And here we are now. And I think about it a lot. Should we be seeing the signs on the wall? I mean, not to be negative. Should we be packing up our families and getting out? I think about this.
I know everybody thinks about it, you know. I think about it too, but it wasn't that easy to leave then either, you know. For a while it was possible, but very difficult, and only people who had the money to pay for things and pay off people were able to get like a voyage on a ship, or somehow were able to get out. And some countries wouldn't take anybody. And like I said, you have to have money to get papers. Now it's not a simple situation at all.
Right, but should we be smarter, knowing what we know happened to them? I mean, not that you could answer for each one of us, but should we be smarter? We do have the ability. We could go to Israel. They'll always take us in. And, do we pack up all our money and sell our houses and go? I don't know the answer, but it does play on my minds a lot.
No, I understand, but that is one of the reasons why I read that message from Holocaust survivors. We must not lose hope, and we must not despair, and we must fight back and believe that we will win this, that things will get better.
Well, thank you for sharing. It was very, very touching.
Saul?
Yeah, Olivia, it was like I'm sure everybody else, I found your presentation spellbinding, and I really, appreciate that you gave us this time and opportunity. Let me ask you this. With all the museums that you've worked at, what percentage of the people who have the most interest did you find to be youngsters, kids in high school and college and so on? And having seen what you have to present to them, how were they affected by it?
Admittedly, I spoke primarily to high school and middle school. And very many were very curious. Many who were not Jewish were very curious and asked questions. And they seemed to know, because when I am speaking to an audience of high school students or middle school, I'll ask questions like, what's a ghetto? And somebody would raise their hands and they knew what's a ghetto, or what's a death march, they knew. So they came prepared to my lecture, and they were generally, this is high school and middle school, and pretty well behaved and curious. A lot of the non-Jewish kids, very curious. When I worked at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, I also spoke to younger kids. You had to change your speech a little bit and your attempts a little bit, because explanations you had to change because you had to speak on their level more. But unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to talk to college students, you know, in these museums. I would do it, you know. But primarily, you know, they bring in high school and middle school, because that's when they're learning the Holocaust, and the public schools arrange the trips.
Thank you.
Livy, Shari, and Cheryl both have their hands raised.
Okay.
Shari, you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. Livy, I read your book. I was fascinated by it and all your family pictures and everything. I had a question. When your family finally got the visa to come to the United States, you said that they had second thoughts about it. If they knew that Hungary wasn't safe for their family under the communist regime, and if the revolution had won, that the Jews could have been wiped out again, why did your parents have second thoughts about coming here?
They didn't have second thoughts about coming to this country. I don't remember what you mean.
You said sometimes that you retracted the visa and then you have reapplied back and
Oh,
forth.
in the book I said.
Right.
Oh, I see what. Oh, I thought you meant that I said that today. Oh, yes,
No.
yes. Okay, so they were insecure. They were insecure. But imagine what it's like to leave your country, your continent, the place where you speak the language, to go to another place where you don't speak the language and you don't know what you're going to do for a living or how life is going to turn out. They were insecure. So they kept changing their mind and saying, oh, no, we're not going to go, we're going to go, we're not going to go. And I kept taking the papers back and forth. They were insecure. And I was ready to just go along with whatever they decided. But yes, they were insecure. And now that I'm sitting here and I was talking to, I forgot now the lady's name, who I was talking to before. Do you know her name? Okay, I don't remember the name.
Michelle?
Yes. So, you know, you think about leaving your country, the place where you're living, where you have a job, where you have your family, and you speak the language, to go to another country where you don't speak the language and you don't know what you're going to be able to do to support your family, you would feel very insecure. So yeah, they were insecure.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I'm over here.
Hi,
How do I get on?
Cheryl.
I don't know how to
Cheryl
get
is
on.
one of my cousins who was
And
there the day I arrived.
I don't know how to get on. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. I was very impressed, extremely, learning our family history from you. I read when you wrote. Didn't your mom dictate that first story?
My mother wrote the letter. I translated it to English.
Okay, I read that. I read your book, and I was truly, truly amazed growing up, not realizing so much. I just remembered the fun times we had on Saturday.
Yeah.
When you went to your aunt Margot, my grandma Margot, which is your mom, Aunt Valley's sister. And what blew me away was I remember knowing, I didn't even know, I didn't understand, I was young, but I remember her mom had tremors.
Yes.
But she had no physical symptoms. And my dad, as you know, was a Holocaust survivor. He got frostbite from taking his shoes off. So you never mentioned if your mom, I don't know if it's like out of place to mention this, did her feet ruined from, actually 3 questions or 2, from climbing on the bomb she was creating at the time? And number 2, what really was an inspiration to me is you came to this country. I don't recall where your parents learned to speak English, but how in God's name, I remember reading in the book about putting you in the proper grade.
Yeah.
But how did you get to be excel? I mean, how did you excel as a student to the point that you were able to go to college and perform so well when you didn't have
thank
the
you for the
support system?
compliment.
I never understood that. I still don't to this day.
Thank you for the compliment, Cheryl. I think I said in the book, yeah, they put me into ESL, and at first they put me into cooking and art and gym, and I didn't like cooking and gym. Art was okay. ESL was fine because I met a lot of people there who became my friends, and I picked up the language, and then I was able to do the academics. And I was a serious student at that time and always.
It's just amazing. And what about my other question about your parents never talked to me. I mean, like never talked. We talked about fun stuff when as you know, when your mother and my grandma and Aunt Clara got together, they'd laugh and considering all they've been through. But
yeah.
Did your mom, I mean, she had the mental issues, but she must have been a lot, I mean, she must have been extremely strong in her own way. You can answer my question, like, did she, like my dad's feet had frostbite, I mentioned. Did she have any other effects from what she did that stayed with her, besides the mental issues, survivor guilt, which a lot of them had?
Did she have any other issues?
Yeah, I mean, her, like you said, she climbed on bombs. I can't picture her.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she got arthritis in her legs and knees and in her back. She had very bad knees. She said that this was because she was exposed to the cold and the elements. And she had always a lot of arthritic problems. She had a lot of anxiety problems. And in their own way, each of these people were very strong. Your mother, your grandmother, my mother, Ava's mother and father, my father, your father, you know, they were all very strong. Clara, her husband, they were very strong people to live through what they lived through, to lose people they lost and be able to go on with life.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You didn't mention this, but didn't your mom, she was so good with people after what she went through. Didn't she work with children? She babysat?
She did. She took care of children. She loved children. She always found things to do with them. You know, I was a teenager and I tried to do babysitting, but I couldn't handle the children. She could. She went to make pudding with them and she did other things with them and she always occupied them. And they were interested in what she had to say because she made up stories. She used to tell my children these stories that I can't even remember now, but she had such stories.
Also, I'm just curious because you know, we're trying in our side to keep the family history. Will this video, YouTube video, be eventually turned into a more permanent video for your future grandchildren?
Oh, well, will the video be available, Nina?
Yes, like for people who couldn't attend today.
That's Jason. Jason has the video. Jason's recording it. So ask Jason.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason.
Jason is recording it. So
I'm recording it, so I could send it to whoever wants. I could send it to Livia. I could.
Okay.
I could send it to
whoever. Thank you, cousin Jason.
No problem.
Nice hearing your voice and sending love to all of you.
No, you too.
Thank you, Jason.
Miss you, all of you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe we'll come visit you one day.
What'd you say? Oh, Erica, you can't talk about that right now. But yeah, okay, look, this is my family. That's my daughter Erica and my son-in-law Jason, and Cheryl is my cousin. And she was there on the day when I arrived in this country.
But now they got to see them what they look like today. The viewers got to see your family today.
Anyone else have any questions?
I just want to let my mom know, first of all, I'm incredibly proud of her. She didn't see me probably because she was so poised to present and she maybe wasn't sure that I was going to make it on time. But for all of the, minor maybe quirks that we have amongst us. I'm so proud of her. Our family is small but fierce, and you know, as she pointed out, it means so much that we can all be here. And her book has reached friends of mine, my coworkers, and I just wanted to say, Mom, you know, that I love you and we're here for you. So congratulations on your accomplishment.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Olivia.
It's
Beautiful
great to see you
presentation.
here. So I have both of my children here. As you can see, we are a very close family. And I have my cousins here, several cousins. We are a very close family, and
Nina,
well, that
could I
means so
comment,
much.
please?
What?
Of course, Joel, you can comment about your wife. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm also very proud of Livia.
Can you see your face, Joel?
And I wanted to point out to everybody that Livia did this during COVID, which means that she couldn't go to a publisher in person, to anybody in person. She had to do this online. She had to rely on old photographs, etc. She was lucky to get somebody who could design the cover, and she also had assistance from her cousin Ava, who had also published the book, in terms of someone who could do the layout for the book. And I wanted to say that she did a tremendous job, especially considering that she wasn't face to face with any of the people who helped her to put this book together or to publish it. That's not easy. If you think about what it must like to publish a book, and how much more convenient it would be if you could speak to the person in person, the publisher in person, etc., and all that. She didn't have any of that. So I just wanted to point that out myself, because I'm also very proud of her, and this is quite an accomplishment on her part. And thank you all for attending. This was special for all of us.
May I say something?
I just want to say
Heather.
thank you, Joel, and I couldn't have done it without you.
There was a question. Oh, sorry, Ava. After you go, I just want to say there was a question in the chat room, Mom. Maybe Ava could go, and then I can. You can, if you see the chat room, someone was asking a question, but
Okay.
Rita was. But okay, maybe Ava. Sorry,
yeah,
I don't want to. I don't want to get in.
I don't have a question. Livia is my cousin. I just want to tell you, Livia, how beautifully you presented and shared the story of your family. I'm familiar with the story. Livia and I are close and talk about things. I just want to comment that there is one thing I didn't know, and I was surprised to hear, is that your mom used to write. She wrote down, copied the poem. She used to write things. And that's exactly how her brother, my father, was. He also liked to copy things from books, from, whatever it was. He was the same way. And I just want to say, it was so wonderful. I grew up in Czechoslovakia with just my mother and father, and my mother had a sister there and with one son. But when I arrived to Cleveland, I was so grateful that suddenly I had 3 aunts and all the family, uncles, cousins, and they were all very dear to me, those aunts, uncles. I have beautiful memory. And I was in touch with Livia's mom. She was the last one to pass away among the 3 aunts. And I was very close and talked to her often on the phone between Minneapolis and Cleveland. And all the family was very dear to me and continue being dear to me. But thank you, Livia. You did a beautiful job. Just that's all.
Thank you, Eva, and I couldn't have done it without you as far as the book is concerned, because you helped me a lot with the book.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to show you, here's the notebook that my mother, this is a copy of the notebook full of things that she copied, poems and recipes. It's interesting. And
My
even
father
we have an uncle, Alex Shani, from Israel, who wrote something too that we know about. Apparently they like to write.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Steve, go ahead and read the question.
Okay, I'm going to look at the chat.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes with the flow of the meeting, but I noticed the question from Rita. It's saying, how are things in Hungary today?
Yes. Well, you know, I did touch on it a little bit. Hungary always has been known for a very, very high level of anti-Semitism. They have a right-wing government, but I told you that recently they have been friendly to Israel, and also they have opened their door to Israeli citizens now to stay there in Hungary while they're waiting to be able to go back to their homes. And they also offered the Hungarian soccer team to play soccer in Hungary. So that is a big step in the right direction. It is a contradictory situation because I always hear that they have a right-wing government, but this government is friendly toward Israel, and it seems to treat the Jews well. Hungarian Jews right now are in a fairly secure position, but I never trust that because look what happened in 1944. Hungarian Jews were the last ones to be taken, and they, like my mother said in her letter, said, we foolishly believed that the Hungarian Jews would not be touched. And then all of a sudden, something happened that Hitler didn't like, and occupied Hungary sent 500,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. So at the moment, it seems that they're friendly to Jews, but I can't trust that because of my experiences in the past.
Thank you.
There are a lot of problems with that government, but we're not going to get into politics. But this is what's going on in Hungary.
Thank you very, very much, Livy. This has been a wonderful presentation. I learned so much, as did Adam, and I'm sure everybody else did. Eva, thank you for helping her with the slides. We appreciate that. And everybody, thank you so much for coming. If anybody has any last questions to ask before we end this.
I wanted to say something. I just want to tell you how proud I am of you too. And I wanted to share that my grandmother did she shared with me sometimes what she went through, and even though I wasn't like physically there, like it gave me chills through my body to hear what she went through. Like she would I would be there sometimes at night and I would hear her crying out in her sleep. Like I can never fathom what she went through, but I just believe that whatever strength she had, it carried on through our generation, because I feel like every time something's going on in my life and I don't know how to face it, I think about her and how strong she was, and she's my inspiration and she always will be.
Thank you, Erica. I'm so proud of you and Jason and your brother. You know, I'm so lucky, Joe and I are lucky to have you as our kids and the grandchildren, and your grandmother would be very proud of you. And someday maybe you can also tell your experiences to a group about how you feel.
Livia?
Yeah.
Livia, hi. I just want to.
Hi.
Hi. Now, I read your book. I'm very familiar with the story because it's very much like my in-laws' story.
Yeah.
But also, they came here in 1948, so they didn't, have the Hungarian Revolution. Their town is now in Ukraine.
Right.
But what I just want to echo that, my daughter takes an enormous amount of strength from her memories of her Bobby.
Yes.
And she identifies very closely with her. And especially since she lives in her apartment. So it's like Bobby's always with her. And my mother-in-law was a small woman like my daughter, and just very tough. And also just like your mother's friend gave her the soup, my mother-in-law's sister, my mother-in-law was in the barracks with typhus.
Wow, yeah.
She couldn't move, and my mother-in-law's sister would get extra rations because she had a blood type that was that the Nazis would use her as a blood bank, and so they gave her extra rations to keep her blood healthy. And she would crawl under the barracks and hand up through the floorboards, hand up the extra rations to my mother-in-law, and that's really what saved her life.
Mhm.
And of course, her sister could have been shot for doing that. And her
Yeah,
sister
of course.
was even tinier than my mother-in-law. Her sister was only like 4'10", and but she sort of like Dr. Ruth, very tough, very small, and very, very tough. And, they knew the consequences of this, and
Yeah.
but just like your mother's friend, you had to do it.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
What I said is that they survived because they helped each other and they took risks, and they risked their lives for each other.
Yep.
There are many other examples that I could tell you, but your example is a good one. Yeah.
Thank you very much again. It was a fantastic story. We learned a
Great
lot.
presentation.
Great presentation.
It's a
Thank
really good book, folks.
Thank you.
Everybody get her book because it's just really well written.
If
you want to hear about my trip on a MS Volcania for 17 days, that was quite a cruise. That's in the book.
Can't wait to read it. I'll take it out of the library. Can't wait to read it.
Okay.
Thank you again, everybody. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Livia. We're very glad, Livia, that your parents survived and you were here to tell us this.
Yeah, I'm glad too.
So
I'm
thank
very
you
glad.
very much.
And we have to remain hopeful for the situation to improve and fight.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Well, thank
for
you
our
very much.
situation today.
Yes, that is true. Thank you.